Fourth oral question, Lord Watson of Wyre Forest.
Leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
Government is dedicated to acknowledging and honouring the contribution of nuclear test veterans. The Government hosted an event at the National Memorial Arboretum in November 2022, at which a new commemorative medal to mark the contribution of nuclear test veterans was announced by the Prime Minister. We also introduced the £250,000 Oral History Project to help tell their life stories, and a £200,000 community fund enabling organisations to deliver bespoke programmes that build further understanding and support veterans and their families.
Thank the Minister for the great progress that has been made, but raise the issue of veterans who have been given conflicting statements on the availability of blood and urine sample records. In 2018, the MOD acknowledged their inability to locate this information. Yet in 2022, the Atomic Weapons Establishment confirmed possession of a limited number of test results, but in March a minister contradicted this, saying the AWE no longer has these records. Veterans' families have lodged appeals with the Information Commissioner's Office for more answers. What test data exists for the veterans, in what format, and how many does it cover? Will the government promptly resolve this issue and ensure that affected veterans have access to their rightful medical information without the need for legal intervention?
The Noble Lord was kind enough to mention to me that he had written to the government on this matter, and the Ministry of Defence, the letter has been passed to the Ministry of Defence, who will be replying to the detailed points that he's raised. But there is one certainty. The nuclear test veterans can apply to the Ministry of Defence for access to any personal information, and that request can be for any relevant health records or blood data within their service record.
My Lords, a dozen years ago, when I was working in the Ministry of Defence, the Nuclear Test Veterans Organisation brought a case against the Ministry of Defence for compensation. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, which included at the time our late and very much respected colleague Lord Brown of Eton cum Hayward, after some deliberation found that there was no case to answer, and indeed our investigations at the time found that if one had watched a nuclear test in the South Pacific in the early 50s, against a cohort of your peers, you're more likely to be alive than they were, which was quite extraordinary, in fact, for whatever reason. Now, what I would say to my noble friend the Minister is, please, let's respect those that did their work, did their duty in the South Pacific, but please let us not be led down a blind alley of people who, for some reason, believe that they were harmed when actually they were doing their duty, but they were not harmed.
I thank my noble friend for the history, of which I was not aware, but I think I would point out that any veteran, including those of the nuclear tests, who believe they've suffered ill health due to service, has a right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme. And war pensions are payable in respect of illness or injury as a result of service in the armed forces, of course, and with the benefit of reasonable doubt always being given to the claimant, which I regard as very important.
I declare an interest as the chair of the Royal Mint's Advisory Committee on Coins and Medals. And I was very grateful for the Minister mentioning that the medal was announced for the veterans. Could she assure the House that the medal will be available for Armistice Day this year?
The noble lady is right that the rollout of the medals has been a little bit slower than we had expected, because we're keen to make progress on this, and we announced last November that the medal was going to be given to these brave veterans, and others will know that it takes time to design and improve and manufacture a new medal. However, it is that I'm absolutely determined. Johnny Mercer, who everybody will no doubt know, the Veterans Minister, is determined that we will do everything we can to make those medals available on the chests of veterans at Remembrance Sunday.
My Lords, further to the Noble Lady the Minister's exchanges with Lord Watson, would the Noble Lady the Minister clarify that the government believes that nuclear test veterans have an absolute right to access any records of tests from samples they've given over the years? And would the government assist those individuals who are having to follow up the claims themselves where they believe that medical records are being withheld?
I can certainly confirm that no information is withheld. Transparency is very important in this area. Any medical records taken either before, during or after participation in the nuclear weapon tests would be held in individual military medical records in the government archives. And where a veteran is still alive, they can request personal data relating to them as a subject access request. In relation to the atomic weapons establishment, they may need to make a freedom of information request, which has been the subject of questions, but most of the information is readily available, and it is key to make a request, a subject request to the MOD.
The way the Noble Minister is answering this question leaves me very uncomfortable. Is there a member of the government to whom a veteran can turn and be guaranteed that they will be helped through this process of gaining this information? They were exposed to dangerous radiation, not of their own choice, but because they were soldiers at the time, quite properly. But they now must be aided, and many of them are quite old and really need forceful help to solve these problems.
I very much agree that the veterans, because they've played such a valuable role in developing our nuclear deterrent that's kept Britain, frankly, safe for decades, do need to be helped. That is why I've given the assurances that I have in relation to my colleagues at the Ministry of Defence. And of course, work in the veterans area is coordinated by Johnny Mercer, the Veterans Minister. So it depends a little bit what colleagues require, but of course the government is here to help on these important issues.
My Lords, if I may be permitted, because I can never resist a question with nuclear in its title, perhaps my noble friend the Minister could join me in congratulating the Government on the successful launch of the properly funded Great British Nuclear Body this morning, led by both a Welsh Chairman and a Welsh Chief Executive, and join me in welcoming the renaissance of the Great Britain's nuclear industry, which led the world only 40 years ago.
Well, in the circumstances, I forgive my noble friend for the breadth of her question, and certainly join her in welcoming this event today. It is very important for the future of this country. Nuclear energy, nuclear weapons are very important to our stability, our resilience, and our safety.
To the issue of nuclear tests, I'm sure the Noble Lady the Minister is aware of the Montebello Islands off the coast of Western Australia, which are at the centre of a 60,000 hectare marine park. 3 tests were conducted there, and there's increasing research and concern about residual radioactivity there. There are areas where tourists are told not to stay in that area for more than 1 hour. Is the government continuing, whilst absolutely rightly focusing on the circumstances of British nuclear veterans, is the government also keeping a close watching brief on those sites and on the fallout, literally, that continues from those tests, and making sure it takes any remedial action or provides any remedial support or information that it could to help other countries deal with the leftover situation?
Well, I look forward to discussing the point that the Noble Lady has raised in a little bit more detail. And now it's another a question of breadth. Clearly, the nuclear test medal was specifically designed to recognise the unique contribution of the personnel who served in the locations like Australia that she mentioned, and who served with UK forces, and personnel who were part of the testing of the vital deterrent.
My Lord,
Lords, that concludes oral questions for today. Private notice question on the risk of genocide in Darfur. Lord Alton of Liverpool.
My Lords, I beg